Hey friends, welcome back for another video. Let's talk about code switching. Code switching is the practice of alternating between two or more types of language or a variety of languages within a conversation. As with most things I've been referring to lately, this is in regards to the Black community, Black Lives Matter stuff. So in the Black community, this means talking a specific way at home or with your family or with your friends, and then in some cases having to switch to talk a certain way when you're at work or maybe during an interview or at school or something along those lines. As with most things I explain, it's much more complicated than this, but this is the basis of the idea of code switching. So from the jump, you've actually probably seen this already if you have experienced or worked in an office and then seen people outside of work that act or speak differently, or if you've watched a lot of movies, you'll see certain people are presenting themselves in a professional manner so that they don't come off a certain way. This is all code switching. You might be thinking to yourself, why does this happen? Why do people have to change the way they are? And the answer is pretty simple. I touched on this in the white privilege series. Basically, it's societal norms that have made African American vernacular English, or AAVE, unacceptable. These norms have basically taken the basis of English, proper English, white English, and made that the standard, and anything less than that or different from that has been deemed unacceptable. Now you're probably thinking, what the hell is AAVE? You might not have ever heard of it before, but this is actually nothing new. AAVE, or African American Vernacular English, is the same thing as Ebonics, slang, broken English, or other descriptions that people use to describe the way that Black people talk to each other in America and other places as well. Basically, this language was formed way back in the day when they took slaves from Africa, Black people from Africa, brought them over here, didn't allow them to read or write, and from that, many decades, many centuries later, AAVE was formed. Basically, it's a way that they had to learn to communicate amongst themselves that was not necessarily the proper way because they weren't being taught it. There's a ton of research on this, so be sure to Google it and dive a little bit deeper. This is all just surface level stuff. AAVE has existed far beyond this summer, even if this is the first time you've heard of it. I can guarantee you've probably heard the term proper English before, right? Basically, the whole thing is that AAVE, or African American Vernacular English, isn't proper English and therefore it is not good enough, which is completely ridiculous. Just like so many things in our society, things have been whitewashed over the decades, over the centuries, and basically the norms have to fit the way that things are supposed to be. A lot of air quotes in this video, because that's how it was deemed satisfactory, which is, again, not the case. Shouldn't be the case, at least. One thing that helped me to understand how ridiculous this was is when I was in England. Yes, I know I'm talking about my time in England again. Basically, when I was going to go there, I thought everyone sounded like the Queen. The Queen's English, very proper, very posh. But I lived in Manchester. Manchester does not sound like the South, does not sound like London. My roommate was from up north in England. Her accent was completely different, and they had a lot of different words for a lot of different things, but everyone kind of understood each other, right? You can see this in other countries as well. When Fergie and I were in Switzerland, they speak Swiss German, but they can also, for the most part, understand German. Even different countries can do this. Between Norway and Sweden, when I was over there, you can generally get a good enough sense to understand each other, and that's still are two completely different languages. So the question is, why is African American Vernacular English so demonized in this country, in America, where people aren't allowed to speak the way that they've grown up over all these years, but in the same breath, you'll see white kids in suburbia using slang terms, or celebrity using slang terms all over the place and thinking it's cool and hip. But when a Black person goes to a job interview and sounds like that, it's deemed unsatisfactory. This ties into a whole other section of videos that I'll be planning going forward: workplace discrimination, implicit bias, things like that. But this, again, surface level stuff. The real problem I wanted to address here, or at least bring up to people, is the fact of how this affects kids in schools. Basically, if you grow up in a Black community speaking African American Vernacular English, which again is a perfectly suitable form of English, and you go to school and your teacher's like, sorry, what you're saying is incorrect, you're basically setting that kid up for being told that whatever they're learning is wrong at home, right? When someone says something that is technically true, like everybody knows the meaning, and then you're like, no, sorry, what you're saying is wrong, say it like this. That's where it becomes some of a problem. Which brings us back to code switching. The reason that so many Black people in this country code switch is because at an early age they were told the way that they spoke was incorrect, and luckily they were able to develop the skill of being able to talk in basically two separate languages that mean the exact same thing. They understand that there are these prejudices and implicit bias within the world, and if they can't adjust, then they will be left behind, which is, again, part of the bigger issue with the way that this is handled, I think, in schools. Those that don't gain the skill of code switching potentially have a chance of being left behind, which then goes down a crazy rabbit hole of intellectual stereotypes, and we'll get into that in a different video. The same thing can be applied to the way that people dress. Again, the reason that people dress professional is because someone along the way said this is how you dress professionally, and the same thing with the way that Black people have to change their hair. This again unravels into a much larger discussion. So I'd urge you to look more into this and understand that there are different ways of speaking in this country, and there's no reason why we should be discriminating against those that speak in a different way, even though we all know or all can learn the different meanings, and the meanings are pretty much the same. There are lists on lists on lists in Google. Google's your friend, where you can see the different comparisons of things like this. And if you're a teacher or if you know teachers, I would urge them, or I would urge you to urge them to think about how these things, the way that you present this information to a small child, can really affect them growing up. Because proper English, there's a way that you can have both sections right next to each other, in my opinion, and that way everyone's learning and moving forward in life. For now, this is the end of this video. There's a lot of really cool stuff coming. Check out the Believe Divergent page. I post a lot more in-depth race-related content there on a more regular basis. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, like the video, and we'll see you in the next one.